Hey, you guys. Time once again for Tomes of Terror. This is my book review show. Now, just as on the previous ones, I think I say this at the beginning of every one, but whatever, just in case. I don't know if we have new people like coming in or whatever that are just like finding this one. So I've been going through my Kindle Unlimited subscription and trying to find stuff that's available to read for free on Kindle Unlimited that is pretty highly rated and looked really interesting to me. And I've checked out a whole bunch, in anticipation for the next couple of months. This one was one that came up very highly rated, and I have to say, graphic designers, of which I am one, book cover design absolutely does matter, because the cover of this book is rad, and it was one of the things that actually attracted me to it because it just pops right out, the illustration on the front of it. So I did want to give a shout out to the artist who did the cover of this, who's just known as Tom, T-H-O-M. So I looked it up on purpose just because I loved this cover so much. So this book is actually a novella, and it's called Dirty Heads. And it was written by Dries. I hadn't heard his name before. He's Australian. He's from New South Wales, but he's written several other things as well. And he is also an amateur filmmaker. He made a short film called Placebo, which I think won some awards in Australia. So this is his latest book, I guess, because, I mean, it came out fairly recently. It came out like the end of October 2021. And as I said, it's a novella, so it's not super long. I think it's only about 135, 140 pages, somewhere around there. And I honestly, I mean, you could probably tear through this in an afternoon, and you probably will, because it's very fast-paced and it's very compelling. The main character at the heart of it is just, he's such a great character that you really, really feel for him, and you really want to know what happens to the poor kid. So there's that. I actually had to read it in 2 sittings because I started reading it and then I was like, oh my God, it's getting late. I really have to like go do something else. So I had to come back and finish it up the next day. But I have to say, even though when I first started reading this, I think it took like maybe 4 or 5 pages before I really kind of like caught the wave of it, I guess, because, and maybe I'll go into that, like why that was in a minute, but once it kind of got going, I was on board. I was totally into it, and I ended up really, really loving this a lot. I thought this was really, really excellent. So what we have here now, apparently what I've heard, I read the ebook, as I said, because it's free on Kindle Unlimited. If you get the paperback, which actually I might do because I did like this book a lot, and like I said, I do like to support independent writers, but this is an indie publisher that he's working through, and it might be his own imprint. I'm not entirely sure. It's called Black T-Shirt Books, I think. The print version of this actually has, I looked it up on Amazon because you know how you can look inside, and it's really cool because the page breaks, or the, section breaks and stuff like that look like, like VCR tracking, because the book's called Dirty Heads. And it looks really cool. Unfortunately, the ebook, like the graphics didn't carry over, but the paperback does actually look quite cool, like inside the formatting and everything like that. Another thing, unfortunately, when I was researching this book, is that there's also a band called Dirty Heads, and when you search Dirty Heads, unless you search Dirty Heads Dries, you're going to get pretty much all stuff with a band, because I had a hard time. I looked on YouTube to see if anybody else had reviewed this book, and I didn't really. I think Adam Cesar did, but it was kind of on a more, one where he was reviewing a bunch of other things as well. I did find a couple of snippets of interviews with Dries, like at a horror convention and on a podcast and stuff like that, but not a lot of stuff about this one, maybe because it's recent, I'm not entirely sure, but, so I'm kind of excited to be the first one to say, because like I said, I really, really liked this a lot, and I really do recommend it. So this is actually the very beginning of it, and like I said, maybe this is why it took me a little bit to get into it, but the very beginning of it is kind of like, is set in 2000, and it's set like I think it's like New Year's Eve of 1999 going into 2000, because there's stuff about like Y2K and everything. And we're following a 19-year-old named Heath Spooner, who is homeless. So there's kind of like a brief prologue set in 2000, where Heath is kind of describing his life. He's like eating out of dumpsters, and, you know, every now and then like a nice person will give him some money so he can sleep in a hotel instead of on the street and everything like that. And he's hinting that there's some kind of monster, which he calls my monster, which is after him. It doesn't appear that other people can see it, but it's sort of left kind of vague. So after a few pages of that, we actually go back to where the monster came from, like the origin story of this monster and what it is. So we actually go back to 1994, when he was 13 years old and was living with his family, like his mom and his dad and his younger sister, Dee. And from there, you kind of get... So once that happens, like once you go back to 1994... I was totally on board, because I could totally relate to this kid, even though I was much older than 13 years old in 1994. I could, you know, the kid was... It was funny because he wasn't really allowed to watch horror movies, but he was so fascinated by the covers, like the VHS covers and things like that on horror movies, that he would go to the video store and just like look at them, and then he would draw pictures and he would kind of like make up what he thought the movies were about, because he'd never actually seen them. And even in his room at home, he has like all these horror movie posters of movies he's never seen, but he just like really, really likes them. So I really got into the whole VHS horror movie video store vibe to it. And also there's a part where he makes like a mixtape for a girl that he kind of thinks he has a crush on, which is like the older sister of his best friend. And so I really liked that whole, and he had to like tape songs off the radio and everything like that, which I thought was really funny. I'm like, oh, I remember doing that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff was like very relatable to me, even though, like I said, I was much older. I was already in my early 20s by the time 1994 rolled around. But so there was that. So it was kind of like relatable in that sense. So what we have is that Heath slowly starts to, it kind of like is going through his life, which seems somewhat idyllic on the surface. Even though he's kind of a small kid, he kind of gets bullied a little bit, but he does seem to have like a nice family. He has like a really good relationship with his little younger sister. He has a very good relationship with his best friend. And so everything seems fairly good, but cracks slowly start to appear. This is essentially, the sort of subtitle of it is a novella of cosmic coming-of-age horror. So it definitely is a coming-of-age story. It's also a coming-out story. So this is, if you're into, like, queer horror, this is a good example of that. Because you're kind of getting to, this isn't really the only thing, but Heath kind of coming to terms with the fact that he might be gay in 1994, and there's kind of like this big sort of background thing of like, the AIDS scare was still very much prevalent, like in the media, and so him being 13 and maybe trying to come to terms with the fact that he might be gay and he might die of AIDS, and it's all these stuff, like a kid would think, and, trying to like will himself to not be, you know what I mean? By, insisting that he has a crush on this girl and all this other stuff. So there's all of that going on. But out of those fears that he has, not just that, but there's some other things going on with his family, in particular his dad, seems to generate a monster, like a literal monster, which kind of comes out of... They live in like a townhouse or like a duplex, and the one next to them is abandoned. And the monster seems to kind of come from that abandoned place and basically comes over into his world and starts to devour it, or starts to kind of terrorize his loved ones and things like that. This sort of, it's not super described, but he almost describes it as like kind of like a shadow with a lot of teeth, things like that. So it kind of reminded me a little bit, and I don't know, it's not exactly, but thematically it kind of reminded me a little bit of maybe like the Babadook or something like that, where this monster is generated out of like a negative emotion. And it is sort of ambiguous as to whether this monster is real or not, although I don't even know if it's left ambiguous. I'm pretty sure the monster is real. You know what I mean? Because, you know, like in the Babadook, the monster was kind of like just a metaphorical monster more than like a real monster. This one, I get the sense that it's actually a real monster, because even though the things that it does, you know, yeah, you could attribute it to other things, sort of, at least at first, but other people see it. It does have an impact in the real world, like in the sense of killing people and, you know, like I said, other people seeing it and stuff. So basically, so I don't think this is a case of just like, oh, it's a metaphorical monster and the monster was just like in his imagination or anything. I just think that Heath's struggles throughout his life, his sort of trying to come to terms with himself as a person and like trying to figure out who he is, being a kid, and trying to deal with some of the secrets that his family is keeping, in particular his dad, generates this monster kind of like out of the ether sort of thing, which actually just comes in and starts like destroying his life, and, you know, ends up many years later, he ends up as this homeless kid. And that's pretty much all I want to say about it, because like I said, this book is fairly recent, and so I don't really want to spoil what happens in it. So this might be like a fairly short review, but I will say, I mean, if you have a few hours and you really like sort of cosmic horror, queer horror, any kind of like coming of age type story, then definitely check this out, because I ended up really, really loving this. And I think that the main thing that I liked about it, I mean, yeah, it has like a lot of gore. A lot of really bad shit happens to nice people. And so there's that. But I really, really liked the main character of Heath. The way that he's written, I mean, he seemed very much like a real person to me. He was a very relatable kid, and just, you felt so bad for him, just like the entire, because I mean, the monster, him making the monster, it wasn't any fault of his own. He wasn't a bad kid. He was actually like a pretty awesome, like sweet kid. And it just kind of like happened like that. And then like all of the fallout that came out of that was just like so sad and so tragic that you just couldn't help it but like feel for this kid, you know what I mean? And I was like reading some of the reviews on Goodreads. There's not a fuck ton, because like I said, this book hasn't been out for that long. But a couple people said that they wanted to like reach in through the book and give the kid a hug. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how you do feel. He's just like, he's such a good character, like such a sympathetic character. And you see like all these terrible things that are happening and he can't really do anything to stop it. He's just like a little kid. And it's just like heartbreaking, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like horror in the grandest sense of the word, because just this kid that didn't deserve it, but for whatever reason, his fears, his way of dealing with the world has, you know, unwittingly like unleashed a monster into the world, which you don't even really know like how that's going to play out in the end. Like, is it going to, you know, is it going to swallow the world? Is it going to do all this other stuff? But it was just, I mean, this is just such a great, the character work and the writing is like really, really good. It was like really evocative. I don't know. I just really, really dug this quite a bit. So if you like kind of like late 80s, early 90s, like retro kind of stuff, like I said, all video stores, horror movies, mixtapes, all that kind of stuff, and you like it with a little bit of sort of cosmic horror, like I said, like monster type of stuff, coming of age type stuff, then you would probably really, really dig this. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. Although, as I said, I kind of looked at the paperback and I was like, oh, that paperback looks kind of cool. It's not like super fancy or anything. It's not like, you know, Grady Hendrix where he makes the whole thing look like an IKEA catalog or anything like that. But I just really liked, I mean, I like book formatting. I'm a graphic designer and I like book design. So I even like little touches, you know, when you design a book. So I really liked the kind of VHS tracking type of situation that he had going on, like throughout the pages. I thought that was a really cool little touch. So even though I read it on Kindle Unlimited, I'm kind of thinking that maybe eventually I will buy it in paperback just because I liked it so much. And honestly, too, because I love that. I just love that cover. It's just so awesome. And I kind of want to have it. So I think the paperback is only like $10, $11, something like that. So I think I might end up just have it so I can have like a physical copy just because I like the look of it so much. So yeah, if you've read it or if it sounds good to you, then check it out. As I said, it's pretty short. It's only about 140 pages, so it probably wouldn't take you that long to read. So if you want to go read it, check it out and tell me what you thought about it. And that will do it for this Tomes of Terror. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.